Predictably, Democrats in the mainstream media were outraged by today's Supreme Court ruling. Their plot to convict Donald Trump in Washington, D.C. before the election has been foiled. Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, who once violently threatened Supreme Court justices on the steps of the Supreme Court building, called today's decision disgraceful. Meanwhile, AOC is vowing to impeach the justices. And on cable news, the hysteria and fear-mongering was extreme. Take a look.
The Supreme Court is functioning, and it is basically giving a green light for criminal activity in the Oval Office under certain circumstances, which I think, given the present state of our country, is very, very scary.
The president's interactions with the Department of Justice are absolutely immune. Terrifying decision.
For all practical purposes, this is absolute immunity. It's dangerous.
Professor, it's indeed a frightening scenario that you're outlining there.
The president becomes a king in that circumstance, and it's just incomprehensible that the Supreme Court could come to such a judgment.
Trump's Supreme Court has decreed him a king, and now it's just up to voters to say, do you want, there are no guardrails now. Second term for Trump, there are no guardrails.
We've been on this steady march of acceptance, a normalization of political violence. Now it's almost codified.
I guess, theoretically, President Biden, acting within the scope of his official duties, could dispatch the military to take out the conservative justices on the court, and he'd be immune. Think so?
Joe Biden's really bad, terrible week is just getting worse. Here now to respond, senior advisor to Donald J. Trump, Alina Habba, and Fox News legal analyst, Greg Jarrett. Welcome to both of you. Greg, Chuck Schumer actually said the Supreme Court today in this immunity decision, quote, approved treason and insurrection. A, they did no such thing. B, Donald Trump's never been charged with either one. So how do we square a legal opinion upholding the Constitution, which the hysterical punditry coming from all the way up in the Democratic echelons?
Well, I suspect all of those people that you just cited and played clips of haven't actually read the full opinion, which is quite lengthy. And if they did, they couldn't comprehend it. Because the exaggerated vitriol, this apocalyptic doom from the left, would be comical if it weren't so pathetic. You're right. Schumer called it a sad day for democracy. It's the opposite. Democracy functions better when there are guardrails, which the high court enunciated, and then he amped up the delirium by claiming, as you point out, Kellyanne, the justices approved insurrection and treason, which of course they didn't, and forgetting that Trump is charged with neither. In truth, this really was a well-reasoned, common-sense decision. The Supreme Court did exactly as I said they would. They extended civil immunity the presidents have had for 42 years to criminal culpability. Same reasoning. There's nothing shocking in this. Immunity for official acts, no immunity for unofficial acts. So, the earth is not going to stop spinning on its axis tomorrow, despite the liberal hysteria. They need to stop the pearl clutching.
There's no doubt. And Alina, AOC, to the extent anyone listens to her anymore, the people in the South Bronx didn't listen to her in last week's primary, and she tried to save Jamal Bowman, of all people. Today, she's talking about treason, bribery, other crimes and misdemeanors. She's saying she's going to impeach the Supreme Court justices because she didn't get her way on an immunity case. This seems like dangerous rhetoric, but what's the practical implication of a sitting member of Congress moving to impeach justices?
Well, it's not surprising, honestly, Kellyanne. They're so desperate. They've realized after the debate, they've realized after their failing DAs and AGs that are Soros-backed and backed by radical left donors, that they have no chance. And the truth of the matter is we have to keep fighting. We can't get lackadaisical because there are people like AOC who came from being a bartender who is now jumping around in the Bronx, screaming at the top of her lungs. Let's just remember, they scream and call Donald Trump what they are themselves. This is insurrection behavior. This is behavior to create fear in the American people, to believe that the Supreme Court, which we have always respected, and I respect the dissent, I respect both the majority and the dissent as an attorney, but also as an American. Do I agree with it? No, I don't agree with the dissent. But the behavior of people like AOC is the exact behavior that they would like the American people to believe that MAGA Republicans, MAGA Americans, people that love this country, that is what we are. And that is just frankly false. They are calling us what they are because they don't want us to look at themselves. That is why they're afraid. Because if Donald Trump, and when Donald Trump wins the election in November, when we show up and speak our minds and our voices, this will end in this country. We'll get back to the America we know, Kellyanne.
I think it's particularly dangerous, Greg and Alina, when you have members of one branch of government, the Congress, highly critical of a Supreme Court decision that's about the executive branch. It just seems extra odious when I hear them pop off. While we have two great legal minds here, I really want to tap into your brains and ask you about any of the legal implications and considerations surrounding Joe Biden perhaps being replaced on the ticket. So what about the ballot access rules in some of the states? Are they still available? Has it closed? And what is it that either of you know about how that would work? Alina, and then you, Greg.
Sure. Obviously, we know the DNC changed their rules about a year and a half ago. This is a complicated situation, Kellyanne. It's not a simple 2-minute response, but I think we have to think about the implications. He's the presumptive nominee. If he were to back out and say, or try, let's say, for the DNC to replace him, there would be a lot of implications for the Biden campaign. They'd probably be lawsuits, as we saw when they tried to take President Trump off the ticket and failed. It's not going to go down easy either way. And frankly, I think more importantly, politically and PR-wise for the Democratic Party, it's not a good look to go over a black female, to ignore her position as VP, and then try and usurp it because their candidate, frankly, can't walk or speak properly. I'm sure Greg could speak more to it, but I think it would be incredibly damaging. I think they're also, frankly, in a lose-lose situation at the moment.
Greg, it is true that Kamala Harris's job protection for Joe Biden, in choosing her, he chose one of 3 people in the whole country who could not upstage him. I'm not even sure the other 2 are. I'll come up with it later. But how do you see all this playing out?
You know, as the Wall Street Journal said today, imagine if Biden had actually picked a competent vice president instead of checking political identity boxes. That would have changed the equation dramatically. To your question, though, there are 2 major problems with a replacement candidate. In early voting states, there are early ballot deadlines that a replacement would miss. That is a huge problem. They'd have to go to court to get that changed. But the other problem is a monetary one. You know, Joe Biden is sitting on a $200 million war chest of donations, but under federal campaign finance laws, he is not allowed to transfer that to a replacement candidate. So, you know, you'd be starting from zero, whoever it is. And I guarantee you, if he drops out, there is going to be chaos and mayhem on the floor of the Democratic National Convention in August in Chicago. It's going to make the mayhem out on the streets look tame by comparison.
They may be stuck with Joe. Alina and Greg, excellent conversation. Thanks for joining us.